How do you tell someone they're not self-aware? Like, that conversation is so difficult. And if you've ever been in that spot where you're like, oh my gosh, this person really lacks self-awareness and I don't know how to tell them. I don't know how to tell them the bad news. Well, this episode is for you. We're going to dig into how you can have that conversation, how you can really step into that space and deliver that feedback in a really helpful and kind way. And then we're going to get into some other listener questions. We've got some other questions about how you lead people who are older and more experienced than you, how you tell someone they get defensive, and also what's the biggest mistake people make early in their leadership career. Let's go. This is a podcast about making work work. You'll learn about leadership, career growth, and how to navigate those weird work challenges. I run a HR consulting business called Boldside, where I help leaders build epic team cultures. If you lead a team or run a business and you think I can help, let's connect on LinkedIn. My name is Shelley Johnson, and this is Work. All right, Will sends through this question and he says, what do you do when someone in your team isn't self-aware? How do you handle it? I think self-awareness is such an interesting thing because one of the reasons we find those conversations particularly challenging is because it's about a blind spot. And when we're talking about a blind spot, it feels a lot more heightened because of, like, obviously I'm stating the obvious, people aren't aware of it. So we have to bring something to their awareness that they just don't know. As opposed to, let's say you're having a conversation with someone about their terrible attention to detail and they already know that that's a problem. So that conversation feels a lot lower stakes because they know and you know, and you're just trying to move through it and make a way through that. Noel Birch has this amazing chart. I wish I could show you a visual of what it looks like. It's this chart where he talks about conscious incompetence versus unconscious incompetence. So if you think about this thing of like, where I'm consciously incompetent about my skill in maths. Like, I know I'm not good at maths. I also know that I don't know my right from my left. Like, I'm consciously incompetent in those areas. The things that are hardest to talk about with an employee or a team member are the areas of incompetence that they're not aware of. And that's why trying to address an issue like a lack of self-awareness feels particularly difficult because you're taking something and you're like, gee, this is going to feel painful. They don't know, and I'm going to have to let them know. So I want to just first and foremost say it's challenging, it's difficult. Let's just get that clear. Then what do we do? How do we actually bring this up with someone? So I would actually say, in previous episodes, we've talked about the idea of framing. How do you position a conversation like this? So you might say something to the effect of, hey, I would love to have a conversation with you about something I've noticed that I think might be holding you back in your career. So make it important to them. Now, if this person reports to you, let's say you're their manager and you know they want to progress in their career, call that out. So if let's say, Jack reports to me and I've identified that he lacks some self-awareness. This is what I would say. In our regular one-on-one, I would frame it like this. Hey, Jack, I know you've identified that you want to progress into a more senior role and I want to help you get there. I'm really committed to doing that. I've noticed a key skill gap that I feel is going to hold you back, and can we have a conversation about that, because I think it's really important that we work through this. Now, what I've done there is I've asked for his permission to have that conversation, which in most cases, everyone's going to be like, yes, because you've told them, I know you want to progress to another role, and if we don't address this, you're not going to get there, so let's have that conversation. The way you've framed that is you've positioned it in a way that it's helpful to them. It's not just helpful to you because you need to address it because the self-awareness is probably causing all these problems, or the lack of self-awareness is causing problems. It's also beneficial because you're framing it in the way that helps them grow and learn. And so I want to just start there. That's how you position the conversation. There's a couple of things you can do to help someone build their self-awareness. The first thing is you've got to make the unconscious conscious. So you're going to start this conversation by saying, hey, I've just noticed this trend in certain moments where there seems to be a lack of awareness about how you're showing up. And it may not be your intent, but this is the impact of that behavior. So let's say in meetings, they keep interrupting people, they keep cutting people off, and they're just not aware that they're doing that. What you're doing is you're saying, hey, I don't think it's your intent to interrupt people, but I've noticed this trend where when this person's speaking, you tend to cut them off. The impact of that behavior is that that person's voice doesn't get heard, but also it comes across as dismissive and rude. What you're doing, you're not saying you're being dismissive and rude, but you're saying the behavior comes across in this way. How we're positioning that is we're letting them know that there's this thing of maybe a lack of reading the room, a lack of self-awareness that's actually holding them back in their career. And unless they confront that and work on that, they're going to have a ceiling. They're not going to get to that next level of progression. So there's a few keys here. Key number 1 is show why this conversation is useful and beneficial to them. Key number 2 is talk about actual examples. Give them a specific. In this meeting, you cut Sarah off 3 times and the impact of that was that XYZ. You came across as rude or dismissive, whatever it is. By doing that, you're actually then bringing the thing that they're unaware of to their conscious awareness. And then what you're going to do is talk through some actions and some strategies to help build the skill of self-awareness. It's not enough just to raise it as an issue. It's not enough to just go, hey, this happened. This is the problem. Can we talk it through? We now need to move to action. And if you're in a management role, you must, and we think about this as feeding forward. How do we start to look forward? Instead of just feedback where we're looking back on all the issues, you're now going to start to feed forward and think, okay, what can we do differently next time? And so one thing I would be, if I was coaching this person, Jack, around how they stop interrupting people, one strategy I would have with Jack, and I use this with a lot of leaders we work with, is I would say, hey, Jack, I want you to do something for me in meetings. I want you to, when you feel the need to jump in to a conversation, when you feel like you really need to urgently say something, I want you to do this thing for me. Feel the back of your seat chair. So right now, sit back, feel the back of your seat chair. And what that does is it signals to your brain that you're going to wait for that person. And it's and actually I've talked about this before, but they train you in this in mediation. So it stops you from interrupting people and jumping in. So when we're about to speak, and if you're watching this on YouTube, you would see this play out. When I go to speak, I actually lean in closer to the mic because I get excited. I get like into the conversation with myself and you listening on the train or on the car. And so I lean in, I get closer to the mic. Whereas when you feel the back of your seat chair, what that does, it's a signal in your body and it signals to your brain that I'm actually listening and engaging and I'm not going to jump in and speak. So if someone's struggling with interruptions and interrupting people, that is a strategy I would use and ask them to use to help correct or rectify some of that behavior that they're finding is unhelpful. One strategy. Now, that is thinking about an action. The other way you can think about action and how we feed forward and give them strategies to build their self-awareness is we can actually ask them to reflect on what is going on for them in that moment. So we might say, hey, when you're in those situations and you feel like you're about to jump in a meeting and maybe interrupt someone, what's going through your mind? So just asking curious questions, what's going through your mind? And often people will say things like, oh, I urgently had this thought and I felt if I didn't say it then and there, I'd forget it. And then what you can do is you can have a coaching conversation where you start to go, okay, cool. What if when you have those moments, we've got the notepad and pen and you actually scribble it down? What if we try this type of strategy instead so that you don't lose that train of thought? Because that is one reason why people interrupt, because they're worried about losing their train of thought. So just having these conversations where you're using coaching questions can help people to start to reflect on their own behavior. I'm getting into like a lot of detail here. Let me just step back for a sec. When someone lacks self-awareness, the skill you need to help them build is self-reflection. You cannot become self-aware if you do not self-reflect. So self-reflection is the basis and the foundational skill you need to build if you want to become self-aware. And self-reflection takes space and margin. You have to allow time to self-reflect. It doesn't just happen. So what I want you to do with this person is you're going to say, hey, let's just go through a couple of questions and reflect on that situation and think about what would you do differently next time. This type of conversation where they reflect on what happened and they think about what they do differently next time, that is them becoming self-aware. That is them practicing the art of self-reflection. And so I want you to start to use some of these techniques. Now, if that's your direct report, that's how I would run a conversation like that. But if it's a peer, we often think coaching conversations are reserved for a manager and a team member. They're not. I can have a coaching conversation with a peer. I can have a coaching conversation with the person I report to. I can manage up and ask good questions and still it be a coaching conversation. It's not reserved for the relationship between a manager and one of their team members. So I want you to think about, okay, well, next time in this situation, I'm going to ask really good, curious questions, because what I'm trying to do here is get that person to self-reflect. Because if they self-reflect, that's the precursor, the skill that comes before them becoming self-aware. So it's that foundational piece. The other thing I would encourage you to do is think about yourself as holding up a mirror in the kindest way possible. And I think about those horrible mirrors that are in hotels, the close-up mirrors. They're awful. I hate them, but they're there for a reason. Sometimes you just have to get up close and personal with all of the flaws on your face. And also sometimes we get to be the mirror for someone else on our team and say, hey, have you noticed this? Or it could be, hey, I've noticed at times this trend where I feel like you interrupt people in meetings, and I don't know if that is going to serve you. Now, you're going to wordsmith that. You're not going to say it exactly how I just said it, because that's probably going to come across as really abrupt. But the point is, you sometimes need to be the mirror for people on your team. And as challenging as that is, it's also a gift. And I think about this beautiful manager, Arthur, who I worked with a long time ago, and he sticks out in my brain as being someone who held the mirror up for people. And he would always do it in the most kind, generous way. And the way that I would describe him, and I still have such a deep respect and fondness, and I just find him one of the most standout managers that I got to work with. And I didn't report to him. He was a peer. And he was on a management team that I was part of. And I remember he would call me after certain meetings. He's like, hey, Shell, I just want to talk to you about that meeting. And I always knew it was going to be some really tough feedback. But I had such trust in him that he cared about me. I knew, I don't know why. I'm trying to think, why did I know that he cared about me as a person? I think we'd had so many conversations about my development and growth, so many kind of informal coaching conversations, and he would speak to my potential. He would often speak to, hey, I can see you could do this, and this thing here, if we can just address that, that's going to really propel you forward. And he didn't have to do that. I didn't report to him. He was in a different team. And I saw him as an internal mentor in that organization. And the way I've often described him is this whole thing of truth telling is trust building. And we had such deep trust because I always knew where I stood with him. And he would pick up the phone and he would say, Shell, you really crushed that today. Or he would say, Shell, that wasn't your best work, and here's what I think you need to do to tweak it. And it would go both ways. I also felt the permission to challenge him as a person and be have really direct conversations. So it wasn't one-sided. But I do think that you get to be that person for someone. And if you can show that you genuinely care about their success, and emphasis on the word genuinely, if you genuinely care about their success and their future, then that to me gives you the permission to challenge them. And that's what I felt with that dynamic when I used to work with Arthur. And I used to call him Uncle Arthur, and we'd have these Uncle Arthur chats. But he's a good egg, and I still think about that as being one of the key learnings I had as a leader, that those moments of knowing where you stand with someone and them telling you the truth is so helpful. One other thing, lack of self-awareness is such a tricky thing to address. And so one other thing I would say, how do we simplify it down? Because often we think of self-awareness as super, super complex to build. I don't know, maybe my brain's just very simplistic, but I think that self-awareness is just the art of noticing. That's it. It's the art of noticing. People who are self-aware, they notice what they're doing, they notice what they say, they notice their body language, they notice the nonverbal cues, and they notice that in others. That is what self-aware people do. They just notice. And I believe that every single person can build a skill in noticing. Another way to put it is they're just observant. Observant. How do you say observant?
Observant.
It's hard to say.
Yeah.
Anyway, they're observant, however you say it. But I want you to think about it and go, okay, I'm not trying to, I don't know why I feel like sometimes we overcomplicate this stuff. I don't think it's as complicated as we make it. Every person can get good at noticing. I genuinely believe that. But tell me if I'm wrong, always open to feedback, right? Especially if it's positive.
Are you self-aware to know that, Shel?
Yeah, I'm self-aware, and I'm self-aware enough to know that I love positive feedback.
Do you want to grow in your career? Are you after a fresh start or some inspiration? Or perhaps you're in a career crisis? The book Sort Your Career Out and Make More Money by Shelley Johnson and Glenn James is such a great resource at any stage in your career. It will give you practical strategies for things like getting a promotion, making more money, moving into a leadership role, taking career risks, or if it's time to quit your job, and so much more. You can find Sort Your Career Out and Make More Money wherever good books are sold or via the link in the podcast show notes. It's also available as an audiobook.
Oh, I didn't say this, but I will just add this one in for free. Claire Hughes Johnson has this amazing self-awareness checklist. And basically she says, I'm going to find it because it's so good. Let me just find it. Claire Hughes Johnson. Here we go. Okay, Claire Hughes Johnson. She is the COO at Stripe, and she wrote it's almost like the best handbook ever for leaders. I love it. It's very practical. But she says this: if you're not self-aware, how would you know? Well, here are some telltale signs. Do you consistently get feedback that you disagree with? This doesn't mean the feedback is correct, but it does mean that how you perceive others differs from how you perceive yourself. Do you often feel frustrated and annoyed because you don't agree with your team's direction or decisions? Do you feel drained at the end of the day and can't pinpoint why? Do you struggle to describe what kinds of work you do and don't enjoy doing? So if you listen to those questions and you list them out, that can actually point to whether you're self-aware or not. So it's kind of getting to this thing of, if you are self-aware, you should be able to kind of answer those questions fairly easily. But if you find yourself thinking, oh, I don't know why I get drained at the end of the day. I don't know what kinds of work I do and don't enjoy doing. I do get feedback that I disagree with frequently. Some of those answers can point to a lack of self-awareness or to being self-aware, depending on how you answer. Great tool, super helpful. Actually, if you're a leader, it's a really good one to use with your team. I mean, it's a bit tricky, but Claire Hughes Johnson, absolutely fabulous. Her book, Scaling People, I believe it's called. Next one is from MXX. How do you lead people who are older or more experienced than you? Sorry, MMX, but I'm just going to say, I don't know why this question comes up so much. Again, maybe I'm oversimplifying it, but I just don't think this is as big a problem as we make it out to be. I think especially when you're a young leader, I think we inflate this issue. I think we make it bigger in our minds than it actually is, and that in and of itself is probably part of the problem. That we're like, oh, I'm managing people who are older than me. They must not respect me. I don't know. I think if we play into some of that and we actually overemphasize it, it becomes a self-fulfilling prophecy and it actually becomes an inhibitor. I just don't see it as that big a problem. I've never had massive HR issues where it's older people on a team coming to me and going, this young manager doesn't know what they're doing. I just haven't seen that. So first of all, I just don't think I think maybe we're overplaying this problem. I don't think it's that big a deal. The next thing is, if you do have team members, I would say a better way of framing this is, if you've got a really diverse team, instead of just framing it as I've got older team members, it's like, do you have a diverse team with people who are very different to you? Yes, we all have team members who are different to us. And so the best way to handle that is to actually play to the amazing diversity you have on your team and look at what are the different motivators of the people who are here on my team. What motivates them? And so you can do this in really practical ways. You can ask people just point blank, what motivates you at work and what drains your energy? And you can do this in a team meeting context. We had a whole bunch of leaders we were working with recently that ran this with their team. They got together, they asked every team member, what are your top 3 strengths? What are your top 3 struggles? What are your work preferences? And what are your work pet peeves? And they ran that in a team meeting. They made it really fun. They got everyone to prepare. They said everyone was like pissing themselves laughing because they're like, oh yeah, we all have the same pet peeves, but we all have very different work preferences. Just getting together and getting all this stuff out on the table and understanding, how do your different team members like to work? What makes them tick? What lights them up and what drains their energy? So instead of just like going, well, they're from a different generation, so it's going to be really challenging. I'm like, come on. Like, we're all adults. And that's my answer. Oh, actually, I had one more thought, and so I'm just going to add it in. Again, freebie, if you will. It's not usually age. It's usually behavior. The thing that people seem to find, and I think we incorrectly label problems all the time. Like, it's like an incorrect diagnosis. Oh, this person's of a different generation. It might be the millennial manager being like, these Gen Zs, they're just so entitled. It's like, no, let's just stop labeling people by their age or their generation, and let's think about what is the behavior that I'm finding difficult. And so the behavior you might be finding difficult, you may think, well, this particular team member isn't as driven as I would expect, or this particular team member is rigid in how they work and they're not open to new ideas. Whatever it is, stop thinking about it as like bucketing people into a particular category and start thinking about what's the behavior I'm finding challenging, and therefore, how do I address that behavior? And there's heaps of previous pods we've done on feedback, so go back, scroll your way back. There's a really good one we did on giving feedback, and that will be super helpful because it breaks down the structure of how to frame up these conversations. So MXX, you can take that or leave it. You're welcome. Oh, goodness. We're on a roll today, aren't we, Ryan?
So that was a good one. That was short and snappy.
It's short and snappy. Yeah, I like that. A bit obnoxious. We got to lean into that. Liana asks, what is the hardest shift people struggle with when they first step into leadership? Okay, this is a good one. I would say one of there's heaps of challenges when you first step into leadership. So I'll just pick one, and the reason why I'm saying this is because it's very live for us at the moment at Boldside. We're working with heaps of organizations on this exact issue. One of the big shifts you have to make as a new leader is you have to not just prioritize your immediate functional team, you have to prioritize what the organization wants. And that is a conscious decision and choice. You're no longer just a functional representative of your team. You are leading the organizational view, and you have to move from what's best for me and my team to what is best for the organization. And if you don't make that shift, you are not going to be able to sustain that leadership role for long. There is a lot of, I guess the way you could position this is some managers and ineffective managers see themselves as a representative, as a little politician for their team. And they're like, I'm going to lobby for all my team's wants and desires. And I'm going to make their lives so beautiful. And I'm there primarily to serve these people. And it's like, no, actually, you're there to help the organization achieve its goals. And of course, that means supporting your team and helping them thrive and grow, but you're not primarily there to serve the team. You are there to build a healthy culture, build a high-performing team, and help the organization get to its goals. So there are that shift from me and my team, and I'm going to drive my personal agenda, to actually I need to drive the organizational agenda. That is a big shift that a lot of leaders, they struggle to make. And so one reflection you can have is thinking about not just what's best for me, but what's best for the org. And that is, again, it's a challenge, but it's definitely a really important step. Chantel asks, actually, this is probably really similar. I've just realized as I'm reading this. What's the biggest mistake people make as a leader? Okay, what's the biggest mistake people make as a leader? Thinking they need to know it all. I see this very often where leaders think they need to have all the answers, and that if they don't have all the answers, they're going to lose credibility, that their team won't trust them. I think it's almost like, if I don't have all the answers, my team are going to form some kind of coup and I'll be out. It's just like, no, actually, the funniest part is your team know you don't have all the answers. Like, they know. And I just think, if you try to present a front that you have all the answers, you're just going to annoy everyone. You know those people at the know-it-alls of this world? They just annoy people. Like, you don't need to know it all. So actually relieving yourself of the pressure of feeling like you have to have it all together, you have to know all the answers. And instead, it's just so refreshing when a manager says to their team, you know what? This is a challenge. I don't have all the answers, but I think in this room we can come up with the right answer. And that's language, by the way, you can use. You can say, I love a good one-liner. Like, I love a one-liner. I'm all about that life. I got a fair few up my sleeve. And that's one of them. And so you can, if you're confronting a challenge, for example, like AI, we're all in this space where my sister, Laura Higgins, she calls it AI anxiety. We all have AI anxiety, or at least I do. And I don't want to paint everyone with the same brush, but this idea of, like, if your team are asking you questions about how AI is going to impact their role, just simply acknowledging, hey, I don't have all the answers. I don't know what the future looks like in this way and this way, but here's what I do know. And emphasize, and I love Morgan Housel's book, The Same as Ever, is such a good read. And he talks about how we need to, in times of really rapid change and turmoil and turbulence, sounds like right now, we actually can need to focus on what things are staying the same, and how do I help people to focus on the things that are going to be timeless. I don't know the answers to this. I don't know what's going to happen here, but here's what I do know. 1, 2, 3. Whatever the 1, 2, 3 is for you. You can fill in the blanks. But that type of leadership, to me, it's vulnerable, it's courageous because you're admitting that you don't know, but it's also stabilizing. Chantel, good question. Love it. Hello, because I don't know. That's the hello. Okay, sorry, that's the next person's name on Instagram. How do you work for a boss you don't respect? That's a biggie, isn't it, Ryan?
That is a big one.
It's a big one. How do you work for a boss you don't respect? Okay, so last week I was in a workshop and we asked every leader this question. We said, think of the best leader you've ever worked for. What did they do that made you love working for them? And about 5 of the people, so I think there was 40 people in the room, about 5 managers said, I actually couldn't think of someone. And I was like, that is so actually really sad, first of all. But what they did say was really interesting to me. They're like, I couldn't think of a great leader that I've worked for, but I could think of leaders that I didn't want to be like. What they described to me in that moment is what we would call inverted thinking. So sometimes when you have a goal, if you invert your thinking and you think about, well, what does the opposite of that look like? Sometimes that can give us a clearer view of what we want to be like. So what these leaders were doing in this room was really interesting. They're like, I haven't worked for a great manager, but I've worked for a couple of really challenging leaders who I didn't respect, and I learned more from them than anyone else. And so what they were describing is they learnt what they didn't want to do. So they essentially had this list of things that they said, I will never do this. I'm not going to be controlling and micromanage. I'm not going to be passive aggressive. I'm not going to avoid tough issues on my team. They had this really clear list of what they weren't going to do. And so what they're essentially doing, they're reverse engineering it. And they're going, okay, cool. Well, then what do I want to be like? I want to create an environment where people can speak up. I want to create an environment where I give clear direction but empower people to find their way through. I want to create an environment where I coach people, where I connect with them on a genuine level. So these are the kinds of things that you can do sometimes where you go, okay, when you're working for a boss you don't respect, I want you to think about it as, well, what can I learn here? What can I learn here? And some of those moments, I mean, I don't, again, I always say, I don't want you to gaslight yourself and be like, like try and toxic positivity your way through it. But I do want you to think about, are there some good learnings I can take away here? And I find those can be really helpful. Some of my toughest jobs working for challenging bosses have been the best learning experiences I've had. And I would not trade them for anything. So seeing that as, you know what, this is a learning experience. What do I want to learn here? And then giving yourself a time frame. So I always think it's really helpful when you're in a really challenging work environment to give yourself timelines to come up for air. So I would say, okay, what I want to learn here over the next 6 months, what can I learn here over the next 6 months? And then I'm going to come back up for air and think about, is this still the best environment for me to be in? So just giving yourself both this opportunity to learn, but a timeline. The last question is from Kelly, and she sent this through on Instagram. Thank you, Kelly. How do you deal with someone who gets defensive? And so I've made an assumption here that it's a peer. And there's a couple of things around defensiveness. We have talked about, this comes up heaps. This has come up a lot, hasn't it?
Yeah. I think it was in the last Q&A. It was another question on defensiveness.
Why? I wonder why it comes up. I mean, it's interesting. Why do you think it comes up so much? Putting you on the spot.
Yeah, no, I don't know.
Do you think it's because we're all just a bit defensive?
Yeah, possibly. Everyone's a bit defensive by nature.
We're all just defensive little eggs. I wonder if the reason it comes up so often is because it's probably one of the hardest things to address.
Yeah.
And the reason why I would say defensiveness is the hardest thing to address is because the very behavior stops you from being able to have a conversation. Like if I want to talk to someone about their lack of self-awareness, that's a really tough conversation.
Yeah.
However, they're probably going to be open about it. If I have to talk to someone about their lack of self-awareness, that's going to be a really tough conversation. However, the only thing more difficult than that conversation is if I have to talk to someone about their lack of self-awareness and they get defensive.
Yeah, that's a tricky,
and the reason why
situation.
I mean, it's so tricky, but the reason why is because I can't solve the lack of self-awareness issue until I solve the defensiveness issue. Yeah. And this is why
that's like the first roadblock you need to get through to get to whatever the bigger problem is.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Kelly, good question. How do you solve it? I reckon, first of all, we need to understand what defensiveness is. I think there are 5 faces of defensiveness. So think about the 5 types of defensiveness. So they are, and I'm going to read them to you. Number 1, and I love talking about defensiveness. I don't know why. The 5 faces of defensiveness. Blaming others, number 1. Making excuses, number 2. Counterattack, number 3. Stonewalling, number 4. And minimizing issues, number 5. So they're all slightly different. They're variations. They all fit under this idea of defensiveness, but they show up differently. And so you've got to first work out what is the type of defensiveness that I'm encountering. And so let me just give you some examples because this will make this all come to life. So I'm just doing what Jack told me is an example of blaming others. That's one type of defensiveness. Why are you always singling me out? That's the counterattack. So instead of like taking it on, it's like pushing it back to the other person. It's never been a problem before. That's minimizing the issue. It's downplaying it. If you've ever heard this, fine, whatever. That's stonewalling. So it's shutting down the conversation. It's like passive acceptance. It's not genuine receptivity. It's just like, fine, whatever, moving on.
Yeah, you go away now. Yeah.
Yeah.
I don't want to talk about this. Go away.
And another way stonewalling shows up, and this is from Dr. John and Julie Gottman's research, they said stonewalling is just someone emotionally checking out, so the glazed over look, and they might nod. And sometimes when people are stonewalling, they can go, yep, 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 yep. And then excuse making, I've already tried that, but it didn't work. So that you can see the different angles, and we've all probably heard those things at work before. There are 5 versions of defensiveness. You've got to find out, Kelly, which one am I dealing with? And therefore, how do I want to address it? And so what I would say is if you're dealing with someone who blames others, I would start to try and redirect that conversation by saying things like, hey, I hear you that department has a part to play in this. I want to focus on what is our part that we need to own, or what is the part that you need to own. So actually redirecting the conversation away from this person over here or this external team to actually, what is our responsibility? What is on us? If you're dealing with someone who minimizes the issue, we might say, hey, I hear you that you don't feel it's as big a concern. I need to talk you through the impact. So this is where we go back to the impact. If someone's minimizing or downplaying, you need to elevate the impact that behavior or that issue is having. So going back to, hey, I need to be clear about the impact of this because I don't know if we're on the same page about why this is such a significant issue. If you're dealing with someone who is doing the counterattack, I would say that's one of the more challenging ones because it can feel, I guess, it's a bit more assertive, maybe on a bit more aggressive it can feel. So if they're saying, why are you always singling me out? Or I'm not the only one in the team who's done that, everyone else does it. That kind of feeling of like they're going back, they're coming with a counterattack. What I would try to encourage you to do is if you're feeling that in the moment, that there's some kind of counterattack, sometimes it's actually better not to press on in that exact conversation, but in a different moment. And I would encourage you, use a walking meeting for this. So a walking meeting is really good for handling defensive behavior because it lowers the adrenal response. It gets someone out of their sympathetic nervous system. You're not having to make eye contact. So if you can have a walking meeting and have a conversation about this, and the way you're framing what you say at the beginning of the conversation is going to be very important. So how you frame it up, you might say something like, hey, I really want to talk about this situation and I really want to have a constructive conversation today. And you're starting to position your intent for that conversation. So you'll call that out early. And I know it's really challenging, but actually getting out of the normal environment where if you're usually sitting in a meeting room or you're on Zoom and you change it up and you go for a walk, that can really help to lower some of those more overt defensive behaviors. The other thing, Kelly, I would say it's the same as what I said up front around the self-awareness conversation. You need to position this in what is the benefit to them or what is the cost to them if they don't address this issue of defensiveness. Because the cost, I would say, defensiveness is the biggest career limiter. Someone who is defensive to feedback, that is the single biggest career limiting move, in my opinion. Because you're actually just not going to be able to grow. Like, you are not going to be able to grow. So when you're thinking about this conversation, in your mind, I want you to remember, if I can deliver this well, this is actually a gift to this person. Like, they need to hear it 100%. So if you can remember, actually, this is going to help them in their career. So I need to call out, hey, if this thing that I've noticed, I'm just conscious that it may hold you back, and I'd love to be able to have a conversation because I really want you to get to where you need to go. There's some good ones today.
There was some good ones.
I'm really happy about that. Some spicy ones. I just want to say, if you have any questions, we're always keen to hear listener questions. So flick them through either on Instagram, search Boldside, or LinkedIn. You can find me, Shelley Johnson, and just send me your questions through because we collate them all, and I would love to answer any of the work, leadership, culture questions you have. And if you enjoyed this episode, as you know, I love positive feedback. Love it. Give a 5-star rating on Spotify or Apple and leave a review. Thanks so much for hanging out, and thanks, Ryan.
If you have enjoyed the show today, forward it to a friend, colleague, or family member who you may think it would benefit. Shelley's business Boldside provides leadership training for a variety of different businesses. To learn more, visit boldside.com.au. If you would like to book Shelley to speak at one of your events, please reach out to the team via moneypodcast.com.au.